Good morning, everyone. And I see some people are still coming in, so we'll wait just a minute or two, but we've got a great program for you today. We're delighted you're joining us, and we look forward to getting started in just a minute or so. All right, let's get started. I know some others will join us, but that's okay. I'm Lyle Hanna. We are delighted to have you join us today for Crisis Management for COVID-19 Week 28. Oh my gosh, how did the time fly by so fast? We started this in March. And by the way, sometimes we call it phase because we're a little off on the weeks and the number of shows. But we're glad to have you here today. We're going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion plans, and we're also going to give you our normal update on guidance for legal changes and legislative changes. We've got some great stuff on both these topics, so let's go ahead and look at who's with us today. That slide is going to change, I feel certain, and there it is. So everybody knows Jim Morris. He's back with us, and he's got a lot of things to share, and what a blast it's been to work with him on this project over the months. We also have Ann Sanchez, Dr. Di, as she goes by. I'll give you a really detailed description of her in just a couple of minutes, a real introduction, but we're glad to have her with us today. Allison Petrie is back, and we're glad she's here, and Autumn's going to be helping with some things, and Chase is running the slides. So we've got a lot of things going on. Let's move right along. We're going to start out by talking about why access is the most important component of a diversity, equity, and inclusion program. And then Jim will jump in with some legislative updates. Let's flip to the next slide. I want you all to meet Dr. Di. What a blast. She is so talented. She has a PhD. She's got several undergraduate degrees, or a master's degree and an undergraduate degree. If you're involved with SHRM, you got to appreciate the fact that she's got her SPHR and her SHRM SCP. She's very active in SHRM. In fact, SHRM, because of all the stuff that's going on with Black Lives Matter and other things across the nation, they're getting ready to do a big conference. They're calling it Inclusion 2020. And Di is going to be one of the key speakers at that. She's been doing things with SHRM, all kinds. She's helped create questions for the certification program and a variety of other things over many years. She's also held a lot of executive positions in HR, so a ton of HR experience. She's worked for the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, United Natural Foods. She's worked with Boeing Airlines, American Airlines, Delta Technology, just to name a few of them. She really specializes in leadership coaching and in helping companies get on track, particularly for diversity, equity, and inclusion. But let's flip to the next slide. Just as I mentioned her, listen, she has also been recognized by all kinds of organizations, top minority business leaders, top 50 Hispanic leaders in the United States, top 100 Latinos in America. I mean, she's just really done a lot of cool things over the years that have gotten her recognized for her many things. Now, the cool word that SHRM is now using is IDEA. So diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEA, is what a lot of people have departments at their organizations that are called that. But this new word includes access, because access has been recognized as something really important to help impact this challenge and help be able to do a better job of including minorities in our organization. So Dr. Di, we are so glad you're here with us today. I'm going to be quiet and let you start talking. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm excited about talking about IDEA and those individuals who belong to SHRM. SHRM just posted my article on what is the most important component of a DEI plan, which is access, and we are calling it the IDEA program. So most of you who have been in human resources for a long time have talked about diversity. First, we talked about diversity, which was, making sure we had the right numbers of women, minorities, African Americans, Hispanics, Indians. We didn't track things like, we did a little bit on disability, but we didn't really talk about the incarcerated individuals. We did start doing veterans, but diversity includes everyone. And so we started, I've been in human resources 35 years, so don't ask me how old I am. And so we started talking about the numbers for years and years and years. And then we started talking about the word inclusion, which was where we started to train people on unconscious biases. Now, that may have affected, people for a day, but it didn't really change how we conduct ourselves. We just, it may have affected for the day, but it really didn't change the hearts and minds of our managers or employees because we didn't reinforce it. At least most companies I've been at, and I've been through a lot. And the reason why I went through a lot is because I knew eventually I'd be a consultant, and I wanted to see what the cultures were like in various industries. I also worked at Coke and Pepsi in my early years at California, and then came here to Texas for Burlington Northern Santa Fe and helped them through their merger. And then started the airline industry. And it was fascinating, just absolutely fascinating. And so I got to see a lot of cultures. And those cultures usually didn't have a lot of women or minorities. So we started this inclusion process as part of, being inclusive, right? So we started calling our departments DEI, diversity and inclusion. And that really didn't, like I said, change or move the ability in representation. So that went on for a couple of years in history. And then we started using the word equity. And in my blog or article, I quote Jim Link. He's the Chief Human Resources Officer for Randstad, North America, one of the largest HR services. And what he says is about equity is we discuss how equity is hard to quantify, but don't let that lull you into taking a loose approach to achieve it. The worst thing an organization can do is make empty promises around equity without being able to demonstrate how equity works and point to a specific examples of it in your organization. It's a hollow concept that damages trust and only serves to undercut equity in the end. And that's his Forbes August 2019 comment. I don't know that companies have really quantified equity. It was easy to quantify diversity numbers. It was better in inclusion around training, but I don't know that a lot of us have been able to really define equity. Webster's dictionary states equity means everyone receives fair treatment. There is a transparency to cause and effect, and everyone knows what to expect in terms of consequences and rewards. When equity exists, people have equal opportunities it sets up a favorable environment for both the employees and the employer. So when we started talking about equity, we started talking about compensation, analysis around diversity individuals or diverse individuals. We started to really look at our processes, you know, are they equitable? I don't know that we've really gotten there. And does our employees and our leadership, particularly the C-suite, really understand what equity is? And so, so I don't know. There's been a lot of research under Harvard Business Review, Catalyst, which is really focusing on women in the C-suite and some diversity. The Conference Board does some work. And in the last 10 years, they've shown that the needle really hasn't moved in the C-suite for women and people of color. So has equity really made a difference? And I don't know. You know, my thought is no, because we can't quantify it as well. So I'm a researcher, I'm a PhD, and I love to research. And I came across some interesting research by Dr. Tam. And she wrote in 2019 that for years, diversity, equity, and inclusion departments have been trying to be included in driving business solutions. And my opinion is to no avail. She also talks about if you can only believe the concept of idea, according to the groundbreaking research, access and accessibility refers to equitable access to everyone, regardless of human ability and experience. This will eliminate real and perceived barriers and cultivate, develop, and advance the talent pipeline. My belief is that we're missing this vital component from our DEI efforts. We need the idea plan, which includes the access component in our programs. And it got me thinking, because she talks about access in hospitals and healthcare, particularly around, you know, minorities, women, the disabled, the incarcerated. And if they had access to healthcare, there wouldn't be this disparity of healthcare. So I started talking to Mary Chetty at SHRM. I'm on the diversity panel at SHRM. And we started talking about that and saying, yeah, if we looked at our employment processes, we might be able to get more diversity in all levels of our organization. So that means actually changing how we recruit and the process around, you know, recruiting. So we've always taught our managers, find the most qualified. What projects have they done? What leadership did they have? That's the most qualified. Well, minorities and females may have all the components of education and qualifications. They don't always meet that standard of projects or leadership because they didn't have access to it. They weren't put on those teams, or they didn't have that ability to get on those special projects. They didn't have access to those leadership perspectives or training. So, you know, I hear, well, they just weren't qualified. They weren't the best qualified. Well, you know, I'm tired of hearing that. Or we just can't find these qualified individuals of color. So I think as HR practitioners, we need to change how we recruit. And that means maybe finding those that have 75% of the qualifications, but they have the ability to do the job. So that is where we need to start thinking, is they may not have the best qualifications or all the qualifications, but do they have the ability and potential? And start feeding them into the pipeline and looking at how we recruit, how we hire, how we promote, and take a chance. I have to tell you, I was the vice president of human resources for Boeing airplane business. I was the AVP at Burlington Northern Santa Fe. I was put on the due diligence team. It wasn't because I had all the qualifications. It was that I had the ability. Of course, I had sponsors, but not every woman and minority or disabled individual has sponsors. So they saw my ability, they saw my potential, and they said, okay, we're going to invest in her. I got to tell you, at Boeing, I was the only Latina in a vice president role. AVP at Burlington Northern, and all my positions, there was no Latinx. There were a couple of African Americans. But, we were looked at as the tokens, but no, we all had the ability to do the job, but we may not have had the access to that full complement that was expected as a vice president. And I was very blessed. And so I started looking at individuals that had the ability and gave them the access in succession planning, because I was on the HR team. So I think that's what we have to start looking at. The other thing is, I don't know, when people hear the DEI department, it's just, they look at us like, oh, okay, what training do I have to go to? How many people do I have to hire of color or women? And it just turns people off. But if you had a vice president of IDEA, the intrigue of what does that mean, the excitement around that department would be incredible. And it becomes a new learning process for your C-suite, for your employees, so that you can really get excitement around it. The other thing is, we can quantify access. We can put numbers out there. Who we hire, who we bring in that has ability to do the job. Now, that's changing the hearts and minds of your managers. It's looking at all your processes in recruiting, succession planning, promotions. It really is changing the HR processes, but I think we can do it. I think, it happened with the Me Too. That's where I really start seeing women progress in those positions, on boards, on management. Now with the Black Lives Matter, it is becoming more apparent that we must do that. And we must do it in education. We have to do it in housing, the infrastructure in our government. We have to start thinking about, do our people of color, do women, do minority disabilities, even veterans, the past incarcerated, do they have access to all of those things that can help them get into society and make wages that they can live on and not be the unemployed that we've got right now? So you can tell I'm passionate about it. My plea to HR departments is to start thinking about people's access and even ability to do those jobs, but may not have all the qualifications. So I hope you look at my article on SHRM. I think Lyle's also sent it to you all, but I'm open for questions if anyone would like to ask a question.
All right, thank you very much, Di. We appreciate it. So you're saying give people a chance, see if they have the basic skill sets, and then help coach them, train them, and encourage them so that they can step up to bigger jobs.
Absolutely.
That's what it's going to take to get more people engaged, more people of minority and female background engaged in top jobs.
Absolutely. Or even employment.
Yeah.
In those in individual contributor jobs.
Sure.
And that's what we did in certain companies I worked for, so that we felt to get to the pipeline, build the pipeline. Because once you build the pipeline, then it gets you the opportunities for access to projects, to special projects, to all of those things, training, leadership training. That's the key to keep them growing in the organization, to finally get to those C-suite jobs or those senior leadership jobs.
Right. Dr. Dye, one of our hotshot HR people has put out a question here about board positions. And I have a follow-up thought about it, but I want to hear your ideas first. So have you dealt with trying to get people onto the boards? Some of those big companies you've worked with, pretty hot shot boards. But what are some tips that you found for opening up this opportunity for others?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I don't know that it's gotten access as much because the qualifications for those boards are big. And until companies get in trouble, like Facebook, not having enough women and minorities, until they get into hot water, that's when they start really looking at it. Yeah. And it's still, if you look at, Harvard Business Review, the Catalyst, the Conference Board, it hasn't moved very much. Women are still at 15% of all boards, and that's been the same way for 10 years.
You said 15%.
15%. Right? Same with minorities.
Yeah.
It's still at 15% in the Fortune 500.
Yeah.
But no, and then it's hard to find, where's the access? Yeah. Who chooses them? So it's very difficult unless you know somebody, and taking a chance on someone Now, I'm on a lot of nonprofit boards because I'm a community leader, but I haven't been able to break into those kind of boards that are meaningful in even the top 1,000.
Yeah.
And it's who you know.
Yeah. Well, here's just an idea. One thing that HR managers can do is get their senior employees on other boards, lesser boards, smaller companies, nonprofit organizations. In our organization, just as I think about this question, I'm thinking, well, I'm encouraging my folks to be on the SHRM board, the chamber board, other HR organizations, the compensation association board, so they get some experience in practice. And if you think about it, in your company, you've got other companies you work with. If you can get them on those boards, give them some experience, because it's hard to build up your resume, isn't it?
Yep.
Hard to get the resume that qualifies you for those big boards. Yeah.
And great question. Here's how I try to set up myself is I'm on the finance committee for the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Tarrant County. And it's the largest in Texas. So I encourage my mentees, get on the finance committee, because you need to understand those finances. And because if you want to get on a business board, that's what they're going to look at, is your finance background, right? I know we're all, professional HR practitioners, but really what they're looking for is both the finance and the strategy, right, of how to fill the pipeline, because people are our greatest asset, and they're our most expensive asset too. So really those two are critical committees from my perspective.
Cool. One other thing is a neat point that came out in the questions here is saying, how do we explain to senior leadership that it's very important to have integrated leadership at the top? What difference does it make to the business? If they're really practicing access and inclusion, what can we say is this is what you're going to get as a result of that?
It's all led by the top. So if your CEO is not engaged, or your C-suite, you have to partner with all the vice presidents. I've been lucky that CEOs at the companies I've been at have been very engaged. But what I found in the succession planning is those feeder groups maybe had one or two people that could get into those positions. I think you've got to get their hearts and minds around, and I think they're there now with the Black Lives Matter and the Me Too, because right now that's very important and critical. So it's feeding the pipeline. It's getting those people in the pipeline. I think you can get their hearts and mind around that. Yeah. And changing the philosophy from the best qualified to the ability to do it and the potential to do it.
Well, we really appreciate your input today. And we're going to be talking over the next couple of weeks about other things that businesses, we already know they're doing things, because this is an opportunity. There's so much in the public. People don't want to be left out or feel like they're not supporting this issue. So they're coming out with personal statements and business statements about what they want to do. And they're looking for the right programs that they can put in. So we'll be sharing some of those. You've given us a great start to this. Dr. Dye, thank you very much for joining us today. And we're going to make sure everybody has a link to your blog, because that blog really helps you kind of nail down some of this stuff.
So the other thing that my good friend Mary Chetty said, which is, you're a good friend, is when we look at studies of people who are terminated from organizations, they're not terminated because of their technical ability. They're terminated because they're not a culture fit.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's another thing about access and ability is, do they fit into the culture?
Yeah.
And again, that is access, right, to the culture and their abilities. So I say that because that's super, super important.
Yeah. I've got to tell the group on the line here, you've mentioned Mary Chetty twice, and she's done a lot of work in Kentucky. She's with SHRM now after a terrific career in HR. And she's going to be speaking at our SHRM conference. So we've got a Kentucky SHRM conference coming up in a couple of weeks. So she's super. And you mentioned Jim Link, who's head of such a large HR organization, and he's a Kentuckian. So we're glad we have Kentuckians out there fighting for good.
Very good.
You have a terrific weekend. You feel free to hang on here and
I will
some
hang
questions
on.
at Jim. You bet. And Jim, we're going to pitch this over to you and let you jump in and start educating us.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Great. All right. So let me go ahead and get rolling on this. It looks like I've got a problem with my screen. Give me just a second.
What else
Is the left-hand side cut off?
No, it's all good. We've got the slide up there, October 1st.
Okay, good.
2020.
All right. I didn't know whether I'm remotely working today from my southern operation in Florida, so my apologies. So I want to cover a couple of things that were just covered by Di, questions that came in that kind of touched on the legal. So if I'm wrong on this, she can jump in and address it as well. But there was a question about, should you drop the educational level and adopt assessment tools instead? This has been a long-running issue in the employment law arena as well, and I've been on both sides representing plaintiffs in discrimination cases. And as many of you know, I went from operating on the plaintiff's side of prosecuting to companies hiring me to make sure that they no longer get sued by me, because I was going after big name companies for race discrimination, sexual orientation discrimination, gender discrimination, and so on. So I built my practice on best practices. So let me just point out, the biggest thing that you need to have if you're going to substitute an educational, and I always encourage a substitution, I'm sorry, it shouldn't be substitution, it should be reallocation. So what you do is you have either or both. So you have let's say that you need a master's degree or substantial equivalent of education, of training on the job. A lot of your best employees come in with having additional training on the job, not just coming out of school with a master's or a bachelor's or whatever logo there is behind their name. Best people come in with real life training scenarios. So the biggest part of this to get the broadest applicant pool that would include diversity is to make sure you have substantial equivalent and have it documented well as to what you will accept in lieu of a master's, a bachelor's, whatever it is, and then stick to what it is that you've suggested so that you don't get sued by someone, even in a reverse discrimination, because you didn't adhere to your pre-established job description and hiring practices. Along those same lines, there was another question about how do you get to the company? I think it was Brad Patrick asked, how do you get to the company about the need for diversity? And I hate to be blunt about it, but you point out to them the impact of not doing so, both in terms of litigation costs and lawsuits, potential threats of litigation, the exposure to the negativity of what you're doing if you don't do it, and the almighty dollar. Most companies are there, especially if they're for profit, they're there to make a buck. So if you point out to them that this could impact their ability to make money, they will then turn to the need for more IDEA inclusion and diversity in their hiring practices and promotion. If minorities see that there's no chance for development into a high level position, they go elsewhere. If your talent pool's going elsewhere, if you're selling widgets, you'll sell less widgets to minorities if they think that you're not even including them. And like to stay out of the current scenario in suggesting things, but it's really easy to go back to when Cracker Barrel got sued. I had some involvement with that back in the day. It's about 15 years ago. They got sued for discrimination in some of their policies, and they had to go through and adopt a lot of these to try to show people who were boycotting their establishment that they were starting an inclusion process, that they weren't trying to just be single issue instead of diverse. So it's available. If you do too much of a wrong thing, you won't sell whatever it is you're trying to sell. The last one was, what if it doesn't work out? What do you do next? Are you going to have to keep this person on if you take a chance? And that's a big concern. And so you've heard me on the legal side of things. I'm just going to say it again. Document, document, document. You need well-established job descriptions with actual, not subjective, but objective measuring stick that you can look at a new person that you've hired and be able to tell them, this is what we expect at 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years. And if they don't meet those benchmarks, you can't have your supervisor just saying they meet or exceed all expectations. This is where your review process has to be accurate, and you have to make sure that they aren't subjective standards, that they are truly objective. That way, if somebody, whether they're a minority or Caucasian, whatever their age, race, gender, sexual orientation, the golden rule that you've heard me preach for 28 weeks now, everyone is treated the same. If everyone's treated the same, it doesn't matter whether they are engaged in wrongdoing. You discipline them because of what they're doing. Or if they're not doing their job sufficiently, it doesn't matter the color of their skin, their gender, their age, or anything else. You literally are treating them exactly the same as everyone else. So those are the three questions I saw that we didn't get to. I just want to make sure we covered it because those are critical questions. They did kind of spill over into the legal. So if I messed up on that, somebody can jump in on the question and answer. But that's how I've been training people on those issues. Substantial equivalent of education. Document the heck out of how people do their job. Make sure you document everyone in a similar position similarly so that you don't have overemphasis on minorities, that you are documenting them, but you're not documenting Caucasians, or you're not documenting men, but you are women. You do things like that, you're not treating people the same, and you're just going to get into trouble. So those are the answers I saw to those questions. All right, let me roll through these things really quick. I don't have a tremendous amount of new content on congressional because if you've noticed, there are a few other things going on and Congress is a little preoccupied. Anytime that there's a death of a Supreme Court justice, it causes a tremendous upheaval to our entire system. For those that don't realize it, the single most important entity in our three chambers of our legislative, executive, and judicial, it is in fact the judicial. I don't know whether anybody realizes it or not. Executive can only execute on what the judicial says is law. The legislative can pass law, but the judicial gets to overrule it. Our Supreme Court is the single most important cameral part of our government. And so when one person passes and they have a situation on their hands, it takes over everything. Then, of course, when the president gets COVID, it creates additional upheaval in the regular handling of things. So the end result is no activity really on the House bill. I told you back in April and May that they had adopted, I think it was in May, that they adopted a House bill that had over $3 trillion in spending. They did another one. The problem is that this, and this is, again, I'll say it every week, this is not political, it's just frustration on my part. The House did not change anything other than they shortened the duration of funding. So it's the exact same bill they passed before. They then went out and said, look at what we've done. We cut $1 trillion off of our bill. So the Senate, they should pass this. And, you know, it's ridiculous if they don't. Well, they didn't really cut $1 trillion off other than they trimmed the duration of the spending. So it's a shorter term, same exact issue. They lost 18 Democrats, almost didn't pass it. It was a last second thing that got passed, and it adopted 214 to 207. Now, this is adopted by the House, not the Senate, not the President. The reason why it wasn't more robust in its passing rate was because the people started to get very frustrated with the Speaker of the House, because they said, why are we passing a bill that we know will not go anywhere? We're spending our time, effort, and energy to do something that is not truly an attempt to reach a negotiation. All it is an attempt to get in front of the cameras and be able to say that you've done something when you really haven't. And that was the Democrat side, the moderate Democrats that were trying to reach across the aisle that would not vote with her. So there's a little bit of frustration going on. It featured $500 billion for state and local governments, $600 payments for unemployment, which will cause people to go back on unemployment, $1,200 checks for anyone making less than $75,000 phased out at $100,000, same thing we had before, $75 billion for coronavirus spending, and then there was a tremendous amount of money in there for the Postal Service, food stamps, rental assistance, election security, as they called it, which a lot of this is geared toward what the Democrat establishment wanted to do in the House with regard to the polling stations and other things that just aren't going to be passed. So because of all the dissension in the House and the frustration in the Senate, it's not going to be passed. It's not going to be signed into law, and they don't have the votes to get this done. At this point, it appears very unlikely, unless there's a huge break, that there will be anything done before the election. The reason for that is that there is a tremendous amount of work that's being done with the Supreme Court Justice next week and the week after, and with other judicial appointments before the vote at the beginning of November, the election. These were already on the books. The Senate had already established what was going to take place before any of this ever happened. But the reality is it's probably just not going to happen before the election unless the House comes back with a realistic bill. I suspect the Problem Solvers Caucus, which are a group of Democrats and Republicans in the House, are probably going to propose something else, and I believe it may well end up being discussed. I just don't know that it can be taken up in time. So that's the update on the congressional issue. I wish I had more information, but that's where it is. All right, so back in April and May, I gave you some pointers to be careful of with regard to ongoing concerns about lawsuits. Anytime that you have new things happen and there's confusion or lack of actual direction, you end up with lawsuits happening. People take advantage of it, or it's real. No political statement on whether these are legitimate or not, but we've been tracking, and I started to point out a few of them to you. I wanted to follow up on that because it's becoming a reality, and if you don't have things in place, you really need to start looking at that. So we talked about the March through May increase in the beginning of COVID litigation and other lawsuits that are tracking. Now we have some new ones, and I've listed on there. This is where we literally typically have things start at the shores of our country, and then it filters in later to Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, Tennessee, Pennsylvania, those types of areas. Most of the case law right now is in the bigger metropolitan areas: California, Los Angeles, San Diego, so on, San Francisco, New Jersey, New York, Florida, and Texas. That's where most litigation triggers. Then it filters into other areas: Massachusetts, North Carolina, and like I said, it'll end up here. So you get a little bit of a jump on it. You know now that lawsuits are starting. So as HR professionals, you need to start looking into making sure you're not going to be caught up in this. The biggest areas are exactly what I listed before, 9 key areas. 10 if you want to break one part out, the Reduction in Force and Warren Act. But retaliation for blowing the whistle on COVID, unsafe workplace for COVID, disability discrimination for not giving reasonable accommodations, wage and hour, because you're not tracking people at home, you're not instructing them to not answer emails if they're hourly, you're not giving them policies and procedures that spell out when they're supposed to work and when they're not. Denial of leave for those people who have requested time off and you're refusing to give them appropriate time off. Wrongful discharge for terminating someone for exercising their rights. Race, national origin discrimination, self-explanatory, a lot of these being based on Asian descent or some other descent, which would be national origin related to the outbreak of COVID. Age discrimination, this is the one we've talked about where you can't bar someone from doing the job simply because they are elderly. You have to give them a reasonable explanation of and I've used the Walmart greeter. You can tell them what the risks are of being a greeter, the potential exposure to multiple people walking through the door. If the person says, I still want to work, and you can't get them to work somewhere else, you can't deny them the ability to work simply because they're elderly. The last is Reduction in Force and the Warren Act and the Mini Warren Act. Those are going to be big areas of lawsuits because people have done reductions in force and they did not adhere. This was our week 1 discussion. You'll recall that's where I addressed with you, even though this is a crisis situation, a forced shutdown, you are going to end up in a situation where you will be sued for a reduction in force if you did not follow the appropriate procedures of identifying all of the ages, gender makeup of those that were kept on and those that were not, longevity of employment and so on, and you did not follow the Warren Act or the Mini Warren Act, depending on the level of business that you have and so on. So where are you now as an HR rep? This bottom section here, let me get my highlighter out, make sure you can see it. Employers must immediately take steps to prevent similar claims against your businesses, including policies, procedures, safety plans, and leave policies. Biggest thing I'm seeing a gap in right now with the people I am working with is the failure to adequately train your managers, supervisors, and HR professionals with regard to your plans and policies. Also with regard to your inclusion, your disability accommodations, how you're doing those at home, your leave establishment with regard to people remote working, and so on. You need to monitor your enforcement. You need to allow feedback from your employees, and you need to listen to the feedback you're getting from your employees because that's the ground up complaints. Ground up, not grinding up. The ground up complaints are the ones that really give you the most insight into what your boots on the ground are doing and feeling and any unrest that's going on. Handle it now. Don't wait until it's a bigger problem, because if you wait too long, you're already into a lawsuit, and or if you're big enough, unionization efforts and so on, and you need to try to make your employees happier during this time, not make them angry. So if you take these steps, hopefully you can minimize the risk of similar claims and you bolster your defenses. How do you bolster defenses? Well, if you're taking reasonable steps to try to address any issues, and it's not in response to a lawsuit, it is literally attempting to keep up with the times, you have less of a chance of getting sued or less exposure if you do get sued, because you can explain that you took prompt remedial measures to try to address whatever deficiencies you had during a COVID-19 crisis. So, Department of Labor, I'm not going to waste a lot of time on this, but I do want to point out a couple of things that are critical. This first one is huge. So I could do a Trump impression, but I don't want to start a conversation, so I won't say the huge in a different way. October 2nd, OSHA came out against 37 different establishments, $484,000 in COVID-19 violations. Let me repeat that. $484,000 for companies violating COVID-19 regulations. What this means is OSHA's on top of it now. All of the shutdown, we're not going to enforce, we're slowing things down. We're not going after companies because they're dealing with trying to fix things. All of the little comfort zone, it's gone. 37 establishments got hit with $484,000 in sanctions for violating COVID-19 regulations. What that means is OSHA is now stepping up its enforcement, and the regulations are now in place. You can't use as an excuse you didn't realize, or we're dealing with COVID, or gee, I'm sorry. It's not going to fly. So you need to pay attention to the fact that OSHA exists. OSHA now has its enforcement team out, and there's no more lax rules. You need to step up your time, effort, energy to make sure you're complying with all of their regulations. Along with that, there's another one we've talked in the past 2 different times about the N95 mask shortage. They extended once again the powered air purifying respirators or papers to not just be the N95 masks, but there are some limitations on that. If that's important to you, go back and look at the webinars where we talked in depth, or look at the OSHA website. They've got a lot of description on there, but they did extend that, and I meant to put that on there. I think it's through October 31st, so it's another month-by-month extension, basically. They also did a frequently asked question. I know we have a few hospitals and healthcare people on the phone, so I wanted you to know, or on the webinar, they have, this impacts you a little bit more than it does others because nurses are exposed more often, and some of those are getting sick and or dying. So they have clarified what it is that you have to report, how quickly you have to report, and how you have to do things with regard to inpatient hospitalizations and fatalities. So if that's important to you, make sure to go check that out as well. CDC has a couple of updates. First, for some of you that either were thinking you were going on vacation or anyone in this industry, which we probably don't have a whole lot of cruise industry in Lexington, Kentucky, but who knows? Any cruise ships carrying at least 250 passengers in waters that are subject to U.S. jurisdiction. Again, all of those are canceled for another month through the end of October. There are no cruise ships leaving or entering ports at all. That does impact a lot of industry, even in Lexington. It definitely impacts the Delta, American, Allegiant, so on and so forth. But I want to make sure you knew that. The other one is, there's also $200 million that has been provided both by HHS and the CDC for vaccine preparedness. That just got announced. Additional guidance, as I've told you, this is ongoing, although I will say someone must have talked to CDC because in the last 2 weeks, we've had less guidance than we had in a day before the last meeting that we had. In the middle of September, they literally were publishing 10, 15 of these a day, and they have dropped that way down. So that's the status on the CDC. If you need more information, it's right here. Go ahead and go to cdc.gov, type in coronavirus, or click on the link, and they'll give you all the information that you need. So, Kentucky updates. There's a couple of important ones here, and I'm still confused. I will say this, on our COVID-19 page where they talk about travel guidance, all of a sudden Florida popped up with 11%. Okay, I get it, it's above 10, but they left off all of the rest of the states that are above 10. Everything's always been 15 and above. But then all of a sudden, because Florida jumped up above 10%, they decided to throw Florida in and say, oh, don't go to Florida, it's 11%. But then they left off Indiana at 13%, Nebraska at 16%. They've got Mississippi listed as 20% when Johns Hopkins says it's 44%. I don't know who's keeping up with it, but throwing Florida in at 11, but leaving off the other 6 states that are between 10 and 15. It seems like there's some agendas going on that I don't appreciate, because this should all be about information and not hand picking and cherry picking certain states and leaving others off. But our website's a little bit screwed up. The Kentucky COVID-19 website's just not, they're still not updating it correctly. All right, so the White House Task Force, COVID-19 Task Force, does periodic updates for different states. Kentucky's concerned me here because I don't think that we are addressing it. You know, we have the ongoing mask, we have the ongoing limitations, restaurant limitations, certain things. We're not doing as well as some of the states that are in the quote unquote red category, according to our website. So this is a little bit of a troublesome thing that I want to throw out there, because this is what's going on. We are in the red zone. We're not in yellow. We're not in orange. Kentucky is one of the few that is really not doing well at all nationally. So if we want to throw out a travel concern, other states should be putting us in there, not vice versa. We have 101 cases per 100,000 population. We're the 21st highest rate in the country. We're in the yellow zone for test positivity. We have a test rate between 5% and 7.9. Kentucky is self-reporting a 3%. I don't know what the difference is. We have the 15th highest rate in the country with regard to our test rate. We've seen an increase steadily in new cases, a decrease in test positivity. I don't like test positivity because it depends on how many people are able to get the rapid tests, and Kentucky has so many testing locations, people can get them every day. The rate itself is the concern. We've seen an increase in new Jefferson, Fayette, Warren. That's really not surprising, other than maybe Covington area would be a little bit higher. But those are the three in that order. They represent 35.7% of the new cases. 47%, or nearly half of our cases, have a moderate or high level of community transmission. 12% have high levels of community transmission or red zone. Fayette is in that area, so we're in the critical. Jefferson is not. It's in the orange, not the red. But critical means that any effort to try to open the schools will be automatically shut down by the governor under his previous directives. So stand by if you're in one of the red areas. It basically means everything's at a stop. I haven't heard much about that yet, but that's the announcement on the federal government. Next one, I'm not going to go through the actual statistics, but it shows the issue that Kentucky has, which is it got into our nursing homes. So the numbers that you're seeing are because our nursing homes stepped up versus some of the other states that have higher levels but low level of deaths. Florida, for example, shut down their nursing homes completely 6 months ago, and they're still on shutdown so that they have absolute security, no visiting, et cetera, et cetera. That's why their death rates are lower. So that's the statistical on Kentucky from the feds. That's on September 27th. There will be a new one coming out, I believe, this Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. So then there's two new updates from the governor's office that I think needed to be addressed with you so that you knew what we are doing or what's out there. One was on the 28th. There is a new online portal. This is what I had told you would be coming week before last on the 21st, 22nd, whatever date we had our meeting. They did finally get that portal up for schools to be reporting and how they should be reporting their COVID-19 testing so that we can get uniformity. This was the issue where I was pointing out that Fayette had regular, Jefferson and Warren were showing zeros. And I thought that it was really crazy to have huge population centers not showing any positivity. So there was clearly a lack of uniformity in how things were being reported. They're trying to fix that. So I think that it's I think that's going to be a little better going forward. I have not yet seen the statistics coming out of that portal to see that they are cleaned up. So we'll see by next week or the week after, we'll be able to see that. Also, the other announcement, which is critical for anyone on unemployment, Kentucky did get additional FEMA monies for another 3 weeks of the lost wage assistance, which is the $400 per week. Eligible Kentuckians will continue to receive the $400 per week for August 22nd, 29th, and September 5th. That announcement, I know it's late, guys, but that came out after our last meeting on the 21st, and they are so ridiculously behind on your unemployment that people are still going to get paychecks. So these additional 3 weeks are critical for those that are out of work. If you have employees that are on any kind of, they obviously weren't able to do the work share, but they've explained that if they didn't make enough, they still could get unemployment. So this is critical for any of those. Make sure they keep bird dogging it to get the monies. Anybody that you're aware of that gets unemployment should get that extra $400 no matter when it finally comes in. Then I included some calculations on how they were going to do this. And if you don't have the ability to automatically qualify, you can self-certify. So have your employees investigate that, or you if you're unemployed, so that you can handle that. Question I saw in the question and answer session, that's the end of it, by the way, so if you have them, start throwing them at me. No update on the loan forgiveness process other than they adopted an EZ format that's on the PPP on the SBA website. They did adopt an EZ for people who fell into that category. It's still a little bit all over the map as to how people are going to do that, what their process is, so on and so forth. And so that's the status of that. And I just realized, is the next slide showing when I'm presenting this? I think you guys have been looking at the wrong slides, but that's just me. I'm trying to do this remotely. I've been thinking you're over here on this slide, and I think you're on my main screen. So you got to see the next slide that I was going to cover. So there you go. You notice I have no notes at the bottom. So if you ever thought I was reading anything, nope, I don't read anything. So the next question is from Beth. Several employees on vacation in Alabama, Florida, and Mexico. It's still not mandatory for them to quarantine. That is correct. Let me show you. Chase, help me out. We are seeing both slides, right? Meaning you see the end of the slideshow?
Yes.
Or okay. I just
Yeah,
want to make sure which one I need to pull this. Okay. Let me pull this up on this page and see. Stand by. So you see the website up on my screen now?
No.
Or no?
No.
No? Okay. You just have the meeting? So now you have the website?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So by the way, guys, this is the yellow, green, and red, and Fayette's in the red. And looking for Warren. I can't really see it. Sorry. I know it's out west, but I can't see. Don't yell at me and point at the screen either. So here are the states it says not to go to. But to Beth's question, what it says is there is a recommendation of a 14-day quarantine for travelers who went to any of the states reporting positive testing rate equal to or greater than 15%. And this is new. They've added this in. It's recommended to use extra precaution traveling to states reporting positive rates equal to or greater than 10%. Then this is where I was saying it was a little frustrating. They have updated Mississippi. That is the new this morning. They did not add Indiana. They did not add Nebraska. I don't understand where they're getting their numbers. The numbers are right here. If you hover over these, it should include Florida, Indiana at 13, Alabama at 13, Nebraska at 13, Nevada at 13, Utah at 14, Wyoming at 15, Kansas is 16, They didn't include all of them, and I don't understand why, but it is not a mandatory in response to Beth. It is a recommendation of trying to self-quarantine, or if it's above 10, to use extra precautionary steps, as they said. So my recommendation would be to have those employees, if they can work from home, have them work from home. Mexico would be the one that would concern me more than anything. Mexico has a tremendous spike. I know most of the area in Mexico is actually shut down still. Like, I had a meeting that's supposed to take place in Los Cabos, and Los Cabos is really struggling right now because of it. So someone just mentioned, let me go ahead and jump in. Someone just mentioned that the SHRM code is not updated. So yep, you're right. 1 second. Let me pull up something, because we actually changed the meeting and I forgot to drag that over. So give me a second. I'm going to open it and we're going to put it on the screen and make sure that it gets put out there. Wrong one. 1 second. So I'm going to close this out. We're going to go to the end of the other one and I'll pull it up in 1 minute. Slideshow. From current slide. There you go. That should be the right numbers. My bad. So I'm going to leave this up on the screen. Autumn, if you can verify that, I would appreciate it. But I forgot to change the last slide when I made other changes to the presentation. So that's the status of things. The way that I've told people to handle the travel advisories is to just have their employees be careful. We've suggested that they wait 4 days, be tested with the rapid test. No, that's not fully 100% foolproof, but it at least gives you a little bit of comfort that there's been a test done. And remember, as of right now, we are still under a directive from our governor to have as many people working from home as possible. You are not allowed to force them to come to work under the state rules unless you can demonstrate that there's no ability to do the job from home. But then, even then, the Kentucky, I was trying to pull it up so you can see it, but I'm not there. The Kentucky one is still the May 11th guidance. So you're in trouble still with regard to forcing people to come into work, because our governor's directive is still that you must allow people to work from home unless they cannot come into work. So, and I'm going to pull that onto the screen momentarily, whoops, so that you can see that. I'm going to leave that on the screen as well. Whoops, maybe not. So it's still May 11th. The executive order is still in place. It still requires all of the minimum requirements, individual areas of instruction. The executive orders haven't caught up with the reality of allowing people. This one, I believe, is for the restaurants, if I'm not mistaken. We talked about it before. So this is one we talked about last week. They promised us they would be coming out with new ones. We haven't gotten them yet. Oh, Norma May asked me to repeat what I said about the rapid testing. I'm not a doctor. I did sleep at a Holiday Inn Express, but my understanding of the rapid testing is that the rapid testing is not 100% foolproof, like the one that goes all the way up into your nasal cavity that people say they feel like they're sticking it into their brain. It is a good indicator of a quick test, but it is not 100% accurate. Now, that's what I've heard from both the testing people, the doctors around, some of the other experts. It's not a professional statement from me. That's just me repeating what I've heard. If you get one of those that shows positive, They don't rely on that. They then make you take the one that goes up into your nasal cavity, and they test it that way, and they wait the week to get the test and so on. So that's why I say it's not 100%. Please don't quote me as being the source of that. I'm just repeating what I have heard from doctors and the testing centers themselves. They're just a rapid indicator that gives you a sense of security. Some people say a false sense, but it at least lets you know if you test positive, you need to go get more in-depth testing done. So that's the update for the day.
Jim, thank you.
Did expect some more, but it didn't happen.
Well, we keep holding out for more changes, and it's going to come, but boy, oh boy, everything's a little slow. I think Di is still on here with us, Dr. Di. I thought if I could, Jim made some comments about